Now, several years ago, there was a hotel, and in it was a small, frail woman who had knelt down on her hands and knees, scrubbing the floor day after day. At first glance, she might seem insignificant. As a matter of fact, many of the folks in her town looked down on her as if she was worthless. You see, it seemed to them as if she didn't have a lot going on for her. In the eyes of many, she wasn't that attractive. Her dark skin was weathered by the sun, and she was missing her 2 front teeth. And her clothes were tattered and they were worn. She couldn't read or write, and the only jobs she seemed to be able to pick up were those that involved cooking and cleaning. Yet this woman could care less about what people thought about her. She wasn't fazed by the fact that she couldn't read, or the fact that she couldn't write, or the fact that many people thought she wasn't the most attractive woman. These things didn't bother her one bit, because there was something far greater that brought her heart the greatest satisfaction. Because this woman's life had been changed completely the day she decided to walk. Now, for most of her life, she lived feeling unsatisfied. And as she transitioned from a child to an adult, she began to feel a strong tugging on her heart. She felt that she needed to do something. She felt that she needed to start walking. But because she was uncertain as to how she was going to do this, she silently carried this burden in her heart for years. After she was married, her desire to do something more became even stronger. And it was so strong that she could no longer hide it, and she began to share with her husband this burning desire she had in her heart to walk. But that was a big mistake. Not only was he unenthusiastic about her desire, he was completely against it. So much so that he declared that he would do everything in his power to stop her. And he meant everything. Disappointed, but not discouraged, this young woman knew exactly what she must do. And late one evening, when her husband was fast asleep, she packed her bags, put on her shoes, and she started to walk. Understanding that she would never return to that home ever again. Now, not because she didn't love her husband, but because her desire to walk was much stronger than her desire to stay. And so it was that she began to walk, carefully putting one foot in front of the other, trusting God with each step that she took. And from that day forward, her life and the life of many others would never, ever be the same. Because as she began to walk, things began to happen. And over the span of 10 years, she walked miles and miles and miles, making 19 long trips along the East Coast and leading over 300 slaves to freedom. And all this occurred because God told Harriet to walk. The title of our talk today is God Said Walk. Now, the life of Harriet Tubman is nothing short of amazing. A woman who appeared to be worthless and non-threatening based upon the times, the culture, and her status in that culture. But as we all know, she was far from worthless. As a matter of fact, she turned out to be one of the greatest threats to injustice, slavery, and the enemies of God's kingdom. And she was able to do this because God had a purpose for her life, and she listened to him when he commanded her to walk in it. And because she chose to walk, she was able to walk others along the path of freedom that God had chosen for their lives. But what is interesting is how she did it. Because when she would lead people to freedom, she carried a gun with her. And the story is told of one case in which an individual got scared along the journey and wanted to run back to his plantation. So Harriet took her revolver and in no uncertain terms, she put it to his head and said, "You go on or you die." Plain and simple. Either you walk this path with us or your journey ends here. And she did this not because she wanted to kill him, but because she wanted to save him and many others. And I want to suggest to you today that God is standing behind you today with the same mentality. No, he's not holding a gun to your head, but he is standing behind you, telling you in no uncertain terms to walk in the purpose that he's ordained for your life, so that he can save not only your soul, but through you, save the souls of others. God says, walk. But even as I'm speaking to you now, certain questions might be running through your head. You might be thinking, how do I walk in my purpose? What is my purpose? Or how am I supposed to know if I'm already walking in my purpose? And these are all very valid questions. So to get a clearer understanding, of what your purpose is, you must first go to Isaiah 43, verse 7. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I have created for my glory, I have formed him. Yes, I have made him. So it's clear that if you are one of God's creations, which you were created to bring God glory. We all were created to bring God glory. Therefore, we share a common purpose. But the methods in which we fulfill that purpose are much different. Some bring God glory through preaching, others through teaching, and then others, like Harriet, bring God glory by risking their lives to free his people. Now, the path that God has determined for you to walk down to bring him glory is unique to you and you alone. And the most important thing you can do is be ready to walk down your path of purpose when God says walk. Now, since we are talking about walking in the purpose God has ordained for our lives, I think it's very important that I share with you a few purpose principles. And the first principle I want to share with you is you were chosen for purpose. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet unto the nations." So in this scripture, we see that before Jeremiah was even born, God had already chosen him to be a prophet. He had already chosen the purpose he wanted Jeremiah to walk in. Jeremiah did not choose, and likewise, you cannot choose. You see, before God formed you in your mother's womb, he had already chosen you to walk down a specific path of purpose. So don't stress yourself out trying to figure out what your specific purpose is. God chose it, and when he's ready, he will reveal it to you. Now, the next principle is purpose ain't glamorous. Listen, a lot of times purpose will not be attractive to you. Take, for example, the case of Jonah. God clearly told Jonah to walk his behind to Nineveh and preach. And Jonah's response was, I ain't trying to do that. That's not attractive to me. I don't like those people. I ain't doing it. And as a result, Jonah decided to walk in a direction that God had not ordained. And God was like, okay, you don't want to do it? Well, I got something for you that might inspire you to walk in the path that I've chosen for you. And it will begin with you spending some time in the belly of a whale. And what I want you to understand is that just because purpose isn't attractive to you, it doesn't give you the right to reject it. Now, the next principle I need to share with you is that purpose ain't about you. When God called me to walk in my purpose, he called me at the most inconvenient time. He told me that he wanted me to speak for him. Then he opens the door for me to accept my first assignment. But he didn't let me know in advance that on the day I was scheduled to fulfill that assignment, I'd be brokenhearted in a hospital with my son, who had just been diagnosed with brain cancer. So on that morning when I was in the hospital, I felt I had every right to cancel my assignment. But I couldn't find peace with that decision because God kept saying to my spirit, walk, 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 get up out this hospital and walk. And I'm telling you this today because God empowered me to rise above my pain and do what he asked me to do. And this happened because it's all about God and not about me. So what I need for you to remember when God calls you to walk down your path of purpose is that purpose is all about God. And because it's all about God, God will empower you to walk confidently in the purpose he's ordained for you, no matter what's happening in your life. Now, the next principle I'm going to share with you is that purpose will stretch you out of your comfort zone. Let me say it again. Purpose will stretch you out of your comfort zone. Now, I love the story of Jael, found in Judges chapter 4. Now, Jael is the woman who killed Sisera, the commander of an army who was giving the Israelites quite a bit of problems. And as the story is told, God promises Israel victory in this particular battle. But when it comes to defeating the captain, Sisera, this victory is promised to a woman. And as it happens, Sisera escapes from battle and seeks to find refuge in none other than Jael's tent. I mean, why not? She's just a woman. She's harmless, right? So Jael lets him in, gives him some milk, and provides him a place where he can rest peacefully. But while Sisera was soundly resting in Jael's tent, God said to Jael, walk. He said, walk, go grab you a tent peg and a hammer and nail this dude's head to the ground. Now, I want you to think about this. Do you think it was common practice for Jael to hammer men's heads to the ground with tent nails? Or for that matter, do you think she had ever killed a man before? those things are highly unlikely. But here God was telling her to do something that was totally foreign to her and quite a bit scary, because the scenario had the potential to go terribly wrong if Sisera happened to wake up. He was a mighty warrior, and if he woke up noticing what she was trying to do, it could have ended badly. But don't you know, when God says walk, you don't have to worry about what could potentially happen, because God is by your side helping you all along the way. So as you can see, walking might require that you have to stretch yourself beyond your normal comfort zone and push past your own perceived limits. And finally, the last principle I want to share with you is that purpose may cause you to walk alone. You see, the devil doesn't like it when you heed the call to walk. So he'll do everything in his power to discourage you along the journey. He'll cause people to hate on you. He'll cause people to sabotage your efforts. And he'll even cause people to try to destroy you. So oftentimes when you are walking in your purpose, you will find yourself walking alone. Look at Jesus. After all the wonderful things he had done for people and the time he had spent with his friends, when it was his time to fulfill the greatest purpose he had been called to fulfill and walk that road to the cross, he found himself walking alone. And just like Jesus, you too may find yourself walking alone. But you're never alone for real, because God is always by your side. So those are the 5 principles I'd like for you to keep in mind when it comes to walking in your purpose. But I also have to share with you one bonus principle, and that principle is that purpose is so fulfilling. You know, a lot of times we'll be walking in our purpose and it will be tough, but there's something about purpose that completes and fulfills us. Think about the prophet Jeremiah. When he was walking in his purpose, things got so hard for him that he told God he was done. The gig was up. And you really can't blame him, because it's not easy sharing messages with people that they don't want to hear or accept. And it's also not easy being chastised or even physically attacked because of the messages that you're sharing. But that's the path God called Jeremiah to walk. But what's interesting is that when Jeremiah turned in his resignation letter, something strange happened to him. So let's listen to what Jeremiah says in Jeremiah 20, verse 9 through 10. For since I spake, I cried out, I cried violence and spoil, because the word of the Lord was made a reproach unto me, and a derision daily. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. But his word was in my heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay. In other words, Jeremiah is saying, when I tried to stop walking down the path you ordained for my life by shutting my mouth, all of a sudden I couldn't help myself. Your purpose was burning in me so strong that I could not resist it. I had to speak for you because your spirit would not let me rest. And this is a very important lesson for you. No matter how difficult your purpose may seem, God has designed it so that when you walk in it, you will be fulfilled. Because if you don't, like Jeremiah, you will struggle with the spirit of unrest. Now, here is a beautiful thing to consider. We as women have been called to walk down a variety of paths of purpose. And in our lifetimes, God can ordain that we travel down several different paths of purpose as we transition through the various seasons of our lives. Now, even the paths that we may consider to be insignificant are far from insignificant, because every path created by God to fulfill his purpose is of the greatest importance. Now I want you to take a moment and consider women like the prophet Deborah, a woman who was called to encourage a man whose faith was a little shaky when it came to going to battle. A woman who also shows us that God never had a problem with women in ministry or women holding roles of leadership. Then consider Jochebed, a woman whose parenting was so on point that she was able to shape and fashion her young son Moses in such a way that he would be ready for God to transform him into the greatest leader, second to Jesus, that this world has ever seen. Then there are women like Shiphrah and Puah, the 2 Hebrew midwives who fulfilled their purpose by refusing to obey the command of Pharaoh that said kill the Hebrew boys when they were delivered from their mother's wombs. And let's not forget about the power of little girls who walk in their God-given purpose. Because the Bible tells us that Miriam, when she was just a child, walked boldly and confidently up to Pharaoh's daughter, and delivered a powerful motivational speech. One that was so good, it persuaded Pharaoh's daughter to allow this little baby Moses that she had just found and adopted to be raised and nursed by a Hebrew woman for his early years of life of Miriam's choosing, who just so happened to be Moses' mother. Talk about walking in your purpose. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that God right now is telling you to walk. And just like with a baby who is learning to walk, all you have to do is take the first step. Now, you may wobble a little at first, you may even fall, but what's most important is that you are determined to take another step, and then another, and then another, and another. And as you do this, you are telling God that you are committed to walking down whatever path He designs for you to walk down. That's actually your first step. Then you take the next step by committing to operate in the gifts and talents that God has blessed you with. And then you take another step by committing to operating in excellence so that you can bring God glory. And when you make these kind of commitments, before you know it, you'll be sprinting along the path that God has chosen for your life. So the best piece of advice I can give you right now is make sure you have some good walking shoes, because God is telling you to walk.